long as he could remember. Every day looked like the last, a vast expanse of snow and ice stretching endlessly beneath a pale, cold sun. He was the last of humanity, though he rarely allowed himself to dwell on that fact. Instead, he focused on keeping the machinery of the old world alive. Satellites, communication arrays, and energy grids hummed faintly around him, relics of a civilization that had once stretched across many worlds. For 15,000 years, silence had been his companion. The silence was absolute, almost sacred, broken only by the occasional hiss of malfunctioning equipment or the whisper of wind across the icy surface. Yet in this silence, Elior found purpose. He had spent decades cataloging humanity's history, repairing machines, and speaking to holographic records of people long gone. They could not respond, but Elior never felt completely alone when he shared his thoughts with them. His shelter was a maze of steel corridors and glowing consoles, a place built to last long after its creators were gone. Each room contained a fragment of human memory, a holographic family portrait, an archive of old Earth cities, recordings of music and laughter, even a few stories of people who had never left their home planets. Elior wandered these halls often, speaking softly as if the walls themselves might answer. He had grown used to routine. Each day, he repaired failing generators, checked the satellite feeds, and collected samples from the frozen surface for study. Some days, he would venture further than usual, exploring ice caverns or abandoned research stations. But every evening, he returned to the warmth of his shelter, where the old records whispered of a world he had never known. It was on one of these ordinary days that the vibrations began. At first, they were so subtle that Elior nearly ignored them, attributing the faint tremors to shifting ice beneath the planet's surface. He had felt many quakes over the millennia, some powerful enough to crack the frozen plains. Yet these movements were different, almost rhythmic, a pattern that repeated like a heartbeat. Elior paused mid-step, listening carefully. The ground hummed beneath his boots. He knelt, pressing his gloved hands against the ice, feeling the vibrations travel through him. His mind raced. Nothing on Aurelia 7 had ever moved like this without a reason. It was not wind or quake or machinery. It was deliberate, purposeful. His pulse quickened. Could it be another human? He had not allowed himself to hope in centuries, yet the idea teased at the edges of his mind. He ran diagnostics on his instruments. Energy signatures? None. Heat readings? Nothing above background levels. Biological traces? Zero. And yet the vibrations persisted, moving steadily across the frozen plain. Elior studied them carefully, mapping their rhythm and intensity. Each pulse seemed to tell a story, a pattern his mind could not yet decode. Elior decided to investigate. He packed his essential tools, powered up his suit, and stepped outside. The cold hit him like a wall. Aurelia 7's atmosphere was thin but breathable, filtered through his helmet, yet even through layers of protection, the icy wind stung his skin. He moved carefully, boots crunching on the hard snow, scanning the horizon for any sign of life. Hours passed. The vibrations led him to a wide expanse where the ice was unusually smooth, as if freshly polished. The landscape was eerily beautiful, a mix of frozen lakes, jagged cliffs, and deep crevasses that glinted under the pale sun. Elior felt a strange mixture of awe and fear. In 15,000 years, he had seen much of this planet, yet it never ceased to impress him. Nature, even in its harshest form, carried a certain poetry. He paused, crouching beside a fissure in the ice, when he saw it. Footprints. At first he thought his mind was playing tricks, but the impressions were unmistakable. They were human in shape, each step pressed deep into the frozen surface. Elior's breath caught in his throat. He knelt, running his gloved hand over the prints, feeling the cold that had preserved them. The prints led toward an old city buried beneath the ice, a place long forgotten, even by history. Caution surged through him. After so long alone, the idea of encountering another human, or something like one, was both exhilarating and terrifying. Elior studied the tracks carefully. They were fresh, the ice still crisp around the edges, not yet softened by time. Whoever or whatever had made them had walked this path recently, and yet, when he called out, no voice answered. The silence returned, heavy and all-encompassing. Elior decided to follow the trail. Every step felt charged with anticipation. Memories of humanity, of the bustling worlds he had only known through archives, filled his mind. For centuries, he had been the last witness to a vanished race, the keeper of their stories. Now, perhaps the stories were not over. Perhaps he was not alone. As he approached the outskirts of the buried city, the footprints led him to a mound of ice and rubble. Beneath it, structures protruded, angular and metallic, the remnants of towers, walkways, and buildings that had once reached toward the sky. Elior's heart pounded. The city had been lost for millennia, buried under layers of ice. Its revival was impossible, or so he had always believed. He moved carefully, clearing debris and scanning for dangers. His sensors picked up faint energy readings, residual power left behind in the ancient circuits. Small lights flickered weakly inside the buildings, as though the city itself were waking from a long sleep. Elior felt a thrill he had not experienced in centuries. History, once distant and abstract, now waited within his reach. Inside the largest structure, he found remnants of human technology. Workstations, data cores, and storage units still functional. Dust and frost covered most surfaces, but Elior could see the care with which these machines had been built. Every line of code, every circuit board, had been crafted to last far beyond the lives of their creators. He marveled at the ingenuity of humanity, the persistence that had allowed them to leave behind such enduring legacies. Then he heard it again. A single step, faint but real, echoing across the icy floors. Elior froze. His pulse raced. He scanned the room, but it was empty. Another step followed, deliberate and measured. Someone, or something, was here. He activated his suit's sensors, but no life signs appeared. The footsteps continued, moving slowly, almost cautiously, through the abandoned corridors. Elior realized that the sounds were not random. They were trying to communicate, or perhaps simply exploring. He followed quietly, careful not to alert whatever was present. The footsteps led him to a large chamber at the heart of the city. The room was filled with tall structures, like statues frozen in time, their purpose unknown. Holographic panels flickered weakly, displaying data that Elior could barely comprehend. The footsteps stopped. Silence returned, heavier than before. Elior approached slowly, eyes scanning for any movement. There was nothing, yet he felt a presence, as if the room itself were alive. He reached out to a console, tapping the controls. The holograms brightened, revealing schematics of the city and logs of its inhabitants. He learned that this city had been a hub of human civilization on Aurelia 7, abandoned in a hurry during a catastrophe that had wiped out most of humanity. As he studied the records, the footsteps began again, this time closer, more deliberate. Elior's mind raced. Could this be another human? Or had the city's ancient machines somehow reactivated? He moved cautiously, following the sound through twisting corridors and open halls until he came upon a chamber sealed by a heavy metal door. The footsteps stopped at the door. Elior placed his hand on the cold metal, trying to feel through it, sensing a presence on the other side. His breath fogged in his helmet, and for a moment, time seemed to stretch. The air was filled with tension, the anticipation of something extraordinary. After 15,000 years of silence, a single footstep had pierced the void. Now, it seemed, the story of humanity was about to take an unexpected turn. Elior examined the door's control panel. Ancient technology, powered by residual energy, blinked weakly. He understood enough to know that opening the door could change everything. Inside might be life, or it might be danger. His hand hovered over the controls, a mixture of fear and hope surging through him. Every fiber of his being told him to proceed, to discover what had awakened the city, and perhaps the remnants of humanity itself. He pressed the activation sequence. The door groaned, heavy metal scraping against ice, and slowly began to rise. A rush of cold air met him, carrying with it the scent of old machinery and faint traces of organic material. Elior's eyes widened. Beyond the threshold lay a chamber filled with suspended forms, human shapes encased in stasis pods, preserved for millennia. Each figure lay perfectly still, a testament to humanity's ingenuity and foresight. Elior's heart pounded. He had expected silence, emptiness, perhaps even decay. But instead he found the potential for revival, the spark of hope that had survived 15,000 years. As he gazed upon the figures, he understood that his solitary life was about to change. The first footstep had been a herald, a signal that humanity's story was not yet finished. For the first time in millennia, Elior allowed himself a moment of wonder. The frozen city around him seemed less like a tomb and more like a cradle, holding the seeds of a new beginning. He knew that the path ahead would be fraught with challenges. That awakening the humans carried risks he could not fully foresee. Yet the very presence of life, even dormant, filled him with a determination he had not felt in centuries. The vibration in the floor continued faintly, a reminder that something beyond his understanding had set these events in motion. Elior took a deep breath and stepped further into the chamber. He would need to study the systems, understand the technology, and prepare for the awakening. Time, he realized, was no longer measured by solitude or silence, but by the possibilities now within reach. For 15,000 years, Aurelia 7 had waited in quiet isolation. Now, with a single footstep, the world had begun to stir once more. And Elior, the last watcher, had become the first witness to a new chapter in humanity's long story. Elior stood in the chamber, the soft hum of ancient machinery filling the air. His eyes moved over the rows of stasis pods, each containing a human form preserved for thousands of years. He could feel the weight of history pressing down on him, the knowledge that these people were the last threads of a civilization that had once stretched across the stars. The first footstep he had heard was now accompanied by the faint, rhythmic sound of machinery coming to life, as if the city itself were acknowledging his presence. He moved carefully among the pods, examining the controls and reading the data displayed on the holographic panels. The systems were complex, far beyond anything he had worked with before, yet he felt a spark of familiarity. Humans had always built tools to endure, to outlast their own lifetimes. The technology here was old, but brilliant, designed to survive millennia without maintenance. Elior felt a deep respect for the people who had created it, even as he realized the responsibility now falling on his shoulders. He touched one of the pods, feeling the smooth surface beneath his glove. The human inside looked peaceful, as if asleep, unaware of the centuries that had passed. Elior's mind filled with questions. Who were they? How had they survived? And most importantly, what would happen if he activated the systems that could awaken them? He hesitated, aware that a single mistake could destroy the delicate balance keeping them alive. The footsteps he had heard earlier returned, faint now, echoing from the far end of the chamber. Elior turned, scanning the shadows, but saw nothing. Then a light flickered, revealing a small robotic scout moving along a corridor. Its design was elegant, humanoid in shape, with smooth metal limbs and a head equipped with sensors that glowed faintly. The scout paused as if recognizing Elior, and then continued its patrol. He realized that the footsteps were not human. They belonged to these machines, guardians left behind to watch over the city. Elior studied the scout carefully, noting its movements and the way it interacted with the environment. It seemed intelligent, capable of making decisions, yet bound by its programming to protect the stasis pods. He wondered how many of these machines were active, how many had lain dormant for thousands of years, waiting for someone like him to arrive. A mixture of awe and caution filled him. These machines were a testament to humanity's foresight, but they were also unpredictable. He decided to continue exploring the chamber, moving past rows of pods to a central console that seemed to control the city's systems. Holographic displays lit up as he approached, revealing detailed records of the inhabitants, their health, and the conditions of their stasis. Elior studied the data carefully, learning that each person had been preserved with precise care, their vital functions maintained at a minimal level. The technology was advanced, yet simple in concept, a combination of human ingenuity and automated maintenance. As he read, he noticed a pattern in the recordings. The humans had been placed in stasis not just for survival, but for a purpose. They were intended to awaken when Aurelia 7 became habitable again, when the planet's environment stabilized and resources were sufficient to sustain life. Elior realized that he had arrived at a critical moment. The city had waited for millennia, and now the time to act had come. He took a deep breath and began activating the systems. Lights flickered to life, and the hum of machinery grew louder. The city was waking, responding to his presence and actions. Elior moved carefully, monitoring the responses of the stasis pods and the robotic scouts. Each activation brought new challenges, as the machines adjusted to his commands and the energy systems stabilized. It was a delicate dance, a balance between control and trust in the technology left behind. Hours passed as Elior worked, fine-tuning the systems and ensuring that the stasis pods remained stable. He felt a sense of connection to the humans he had never met, a responsibility to protect them and guide them into a world they had never known. The city around him seemed alive, responding to his presence, the machines performing their duties with precision and care. For the first time in thousands of years, Elior felt a sense of purpose beyond mere survival. As the day progressed, he noticed subtle changes in the environment. Energy flows stabilized, temperature controls adjusted automatically, and the city's sensors detected faint signs of life in the surrounding ice. Elior realized that the planet itself was responding, the ecosystem slowly coming back to balance. The footsteps of the robotic scouts became more purposeful, their patrols synchronized with his actions. It was as if the city were alive, aware of his presence and his intentions. Late in the day, Elior reached a control panel that appeared to regulate the stasis sequence directly. He studied the interface, noting the complex systems designed to safely awaken the humans. Each pod required careful calibration, adjustments to temperature, pressure, and nutrient supply. Elior understood that mistakes could be catastrophic, yet hesitation would waste precious time. He began the delicate process, activating one pod at a time and monitoring the response. The first pod hissed softly, its systems coming online with precise coordination. Vital signs began to register, and the human inside slowly moved, eyelids fluttering as consciousness returned. Elior watched in awe, the reality of life after millennia of silence filling him with wonder. The person inside looked around, eyes wide with confusion and curiosity, and then recognized Elior. A mixture of fear and relief passed over their face, emotions that transcended time. Elior spoke softly, introducing himself and explaining the situation as best he could. The human listened intently, absorbing centuries of history in moments. Elior felt a deep bond forming, a connection that bridged thousands of years. The first step toward rebuilding humanity had begun, and he was both guide and witness to this new chapter. Encouraged by the success, Elior continued the process, activating more pods and bringing more humans back to consciousness. Each awakening was a miracle, a reminder of humanity's resilience and ingenuity. The city grew increasingly alive, the hum of machinery mingling with the voices of those long asleep. Elior realized that the isolation of 15,000 years was ending, replaced by the vibrant, chaotic energy of life renewed. The robotic scouts adjusted their patrols, interacting cautiously with the awakened humans. Elior observed the interactions, noting the trust forming between man and machine. These robots had been designed as guardians, and now they were guides, assisting the humans in reacclimating to a world that had changed beyond recognition. The city became a hive of activity, a controlled chaos that Elior managed with care and precision. As night fell over the frozen plains, Elior stepped outside to survey the surroundings. The sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the ice, and the first signs of environmental recovery were visible. Small cracks in the ice revealed water beneath, and faint heat signatures indicated emerging plant life in protected areas. Elior felt hope stirring in his heart. Humanity could thrive here once more, and he was part of the foundation being laid. Inside the city, the awakened humans explored cautiously, marveling at the technology and the history preserved around them. They asked questions, shared memories of a past they had never lived, and began to form connections with one another. Elior guided them patiently, explaining what had happened, the dangers that remained, and the opportunities for rebuilding. The city, once silent and empty, now pulsed with life and energy. Elior also noticed challenges emerging. Some humans struggled to adjust, their bodies weak from centuries in stasis. Others feared the unfamiliar environment outside the city, reluctant to step onto the frozen plains. Elior worked tirelessly, providing support, encouragement, and education. The city became a learning ground, a place where humanity could regain its strength and prepare for the world beyond the ice. The robotic scouts played a critical role, assisting in tasks, monitoring environmental conditions, and ensuring safety. Elior watched as humans and machines began to cooperate, forming a new relationship built on trust and shared purpose. It was a testament to the legacy of humanity, the ability to adapt, innovate, and survive even after millennia of silence. Days turned into weeks as the process continued. The humans grew stronger, their bodies adjusting to the planet's atmosphere, their minds absorbing the knowledge of the past. Elior felt a profound sense of satisfaction and responsibility. He had not only preserved humanity's memory, but he was now helping to rebuild its future. The first footstep had been a spark, and now it had ignited a flame that could never be extinguished. One evening, as Elior stood on a balcony overlooking the city, he reflected on the events that had brought them here. For 15,000 years, Aurelia 7 had been a silent witness to the rise and fall of humanity. Now that silence was broken, replaced by movement, sound, and life. Elior understood that the journey ahead would be long and filled with challenges, but he also knew that humanity's spirit was stronger than time or isolation. He felt a renewed sense of purpose. The city was no longer just a relic of the past. It was a living testament to the endurance of human ingenuity, the determination to survive, and the power of hope. Elior knew that the footsteps he had heard were not just sounds. They were the beginning of a story that had been paused, waiting for the right moment to continue. As the first humans began to explore the frozen plains, guided by the robotic scouts, Elior walked among them, sharing knowledge, answering questions, and learning from their perspectives. The bond between the last watcher and the newly awakened humans deepened with each passing day. They were not just survivors, they were the continuation of a legacy, the proof that humanity could endure even in the harshest conditions. The city, once silent and lifeless, now thrummed with activity. Holographic records were studied, machines were repaired and optimized, and new structures were planned for expansion. Elior took pride in his role as a guide, mentor, and protector. For the first time in millennia, he felt a sense of belonging, a connection to the people who were once thought lost forever. As the sun rose over the frozen horizon, casting light across the ice and revealing the outlines of distant mountains, Elior felt a sense of completion and anticipation. The first footstep had not just awakened the city, it had awakened hope. Humanity had returned, and the story of Aurelia 7 was beginning anew. Elior, once the last witness, was now a participant in a living, breathing world that would carry the legacy of humanity into the future. The city was no longer silent. The gentle hum of the ancient machines blended with the voices of humans awakening from centuries of stasis. Elior walked through the corridors, observing the careful coordination between people and robots. Each step he took reminded him that the world he had known in solitude was now evolving into something alive and unpredictable. He felt both excitement and a weighty responsibility, knowing that these humans looked to him for guidance in a world they had never seen. Elior led a small group of the newly awakened humans through the city, explaining the mechanisms and history of Aurelia 7. He pointed to the control panels, showing them how the energy grids worked and how the robotic scouts maintained order. The humans listened, eyes wide with wonder, their voices soft as they asked questions and shared stories of the fragmented memories they carried from before stasis. Every answer Elior gave deepened their understanding, but it also reminded him of how fragile their recovery still was. Outside, the frozen plains stretched endlessly, blanketed in pale sunlight and broken only by distant ridges and cliffs. The humans had never seen anything like it. Some were enthralled by the beauty, marveling at the sparkling ice, while others hesitated, fearful of the vast unknown. Elior encouraged them to move slowly, to take small steps into the open world, while the robotic scouts mapped safe paths and monitored environmental conditions. As the group ventured further, Elior noticed subtle signs that the planet was slowly recovering. Thin streams of water peeked through cracks in the ice, and patches of hardy vegetation clung to sheltered areas. Birds, small, resilient creatures that had adapted to the harsh environment, flitted across the skies. It was proof that life could endure, even after millennia of silence. The humans followed closely, awestruck by the tiny miracles of nature. Elior led them to a research station buried beneath the ice, one that had escaped damage over thousands of years. Inside, he activated the lab equipment, and holographic displays flickered to life, revealing maps, energy readings, and historical records. The humans studied eagerly, trying to understand the world they had returned to. Elior explained the disasters that had befallen humanity, how disease, environmental collapse, and interplanetary wars had combined to nearly erase their species. The humans listened in shock, yet also with determination. They understood the importance of learning from the past. In the following days, Elior and the group discovered more robotic scouts, each programmed to maintain the city and assist humans once awakened. Some of the scouts had been dormant for centuries, their power reserves slowly dwindling, yet Elior found ways to restore them. The humans marveled at the machines, noting how their creators had anticipated every possibility. The harmony between organic life and artificial guardians gave Elior hope that humanity could thrive once more. One morning, as Elior examined a network of energy conduits beneath the city, a scout approached, moving with urgency. Its sensors flickered rapidly, signaling an anomaly on the surface. Elior followed, the humans trailing cautiously behind him. They emerged onto the icy plains to find a massive fissure opening, the result of shifting tectonic plates. The ground rumbled faintly, sending vibrations through their boots. Elior quickly realized that the planet was still active, unpredictable, and that surviving here required constant vigilance. The humans worked alongside Elior and the scouts to stabilize the area. They used tools, machines, and improvised techniques, learning the skills that had once allowed humanity to thrive. It was a moment of bonding, a chance for the newly awakened to prove their resilience, and for Elior to teach them the importance of cooperation. By evening, the fissure had been secured, and the group gathered to rest, sharing stories of hope and determination around the flickering lights of a portable energy source. As the days passed, Elior noticed the humans adapting quickly. They learned to navigate the icy terrain, understand the robotic scouts, and manage the energy systems. Some began exploring further afield, mapping the planet and noting potential sources of food and water. Others focused on the city, repairing and upgrading systems, preparing for a larger population. Each contribution strengthened their bond and increased their chances of survival. Elior also discovered a hidden chamber within the city, sealed by reinforced doors. He entered cautiously, curious about what had been stored away. Inside, he found a network of data cores containing detailed records of human genetic material, experimental technology, and blueprints for sustainable habitats. It was a treasure trove of knowledge, evidence of humanity's foresight and determination. Elior realized that these records could accelerate the rebuilding process, giving the awakened humans tools and knowledge that would have taken centuries to rediscover. While examining the chamber, Elior heard the familiar sound of footsteps, but this time they were different. They were deliberate, heavier, almost human in cadence. He paused, listening carefully. The sound came from deeper within the city, beyond the sections he had explored. Curiosity and caution pulled at him. The footprints were unlike those he had seen before, suggesting that another intelligent presence had emerged, or perhaps a new threat had awakened along with the humans. Elior gathered a small team and followed the footsteps. They led to a cavern beneath the city, previously hidden by ice and rubble. Inside, the team discovered a series of chambers filled with dormant machines, more advanced than the scouts. These machines appeared to have capabilities beyond what Elior had encountered, their design sleek, efficient, and formidable. It was clear that they were not meant for mere maintenance. They were protectors, or perhaps sentinels, guarding something valuable. The humans exchanged nervous glances. But Elior remained calm. He carefully activated a communication interface, attempting to establish a connection with the machines. Slowly, the sentinels powered on, sensors sweeping the chamber. At first, there was tension, metal limbs shifting, eyes scanning, algorithms processing rapidly. Then a voice, mechanical and deliberate, spoke. Intruders identified, protocol assessment in progress. Elior explained who they were, that the humans were awakening from stasis, and that they meant no harm. The sentinels processed the information, and after a tense pause, relaxed their posture. They were guardians, not enemies. With the sentinels now aware of the humans, Elior realized the full scope of the city's purpose. It had been built not just as a refuge, but as a vault for human survival and advancement. These machines had been designed to protect the legacy of humanity until a time when the species could safely resume life on Aurelia 7. The thought filled Elior with awe and renewed purpose. Humanity had planned for a future so far beyond their lifetimes that only someone like him, standing 15,000 years later, could witness it. Over the next weeks, Elior and the humans began integrating the sentinels into their daily operations. The machines assisted with repairs, explored dangerous terrain, and provided guidance on surviving the harsher parts of the planet. Their advanced capabilities complemented human intuition and creativity, creating a partnership that allowed for rapid adaptation. Elior marveled at the resilience of his species, how humanity could combine technology, intelligence, and determination to endure even after near extinction. One day, while mapping a distant ice ridge, Elior and a team of humans discovered a hidden cave with evidence of ancient life. Fossilized remains of creatures long extinct lay embedded in the ice, and subtle traces of microbial life hinted that Aurelia 7 had once been more hospitable. The discovery ignited curiosity and hope among the humans. They realized that the planet was capable of supporting life in ways they had not anticipated. Elior encouraged them to study carefully, noting that understanding the past was key to surviving the future. Despite their progress, challenges continued to emerge. Sudden ice quakes, shifting glaciers, and harsh storms reminded Elior and the humans that Aurelia 7 was still a dangerous place. They learned to respect the planet, to work with its rhythms rather than against them. Slowly, they began building shelters outside the city, planting hardy vegetation and establishing sustainable systems. Every success reinforced the sense that humanity was not just surviving, it was learning, adapting, and reclaiming its place in the universe. Through it all, Elior observed how the humans began to reconnect with each other. Bonds formed through shared work and experiences. Stories were told and retold, and the language of humanity grew stronger. The city, once silent, now thrived with cooperation, learning, and exploration. The robotic sentinels worked alongside humans as partners, guardians, and guides, creating a new society where intelligence and wisdom from the past coexisted with curiosity and determination for the future. Elior often reflected on the journey that had brought them here. He remembered the first footstep, faint and mysterious, and the long years of solitude that had prepared him for this moment. He realized that humanity's survival was not simply the result of technology or luck. It was the persistence of hope, the refusal to give up, and the courage to face the unknown. That single footstep had been a spark, and it had ignited a chain of events that would shape the destiny of his species. One evening, as the aurora-like lights of Aurelia 7 danced across the sky, Elior stood at the edge of the city with a small group of humans. They looked out over the frozen plains, discussing plans for exploration, settlement, and resource management. The energy in the air was electric, filled with optimism and ambition. The humans understood that the path ahead would be long and uncertain, but they were no longer alone. Together, guided by Elior and aided by the Sentinels, they were ready to face the challenges of a new world. As night fell and the stars illuminated the frozen landscape, Elior felt a profound sense of fulfillment. Humanity had survived in the most unlikely of circumstances, and now it was awakening to its future. The first footstep had signaled the end of silence, and the steps that followed were the beginning of a new story, one of resilience, discovery, and hope. Elior knew that the journey was far from over, but he also understood that he was no longer the last witness. He was part of a living, breathing legacy, and together, humanity would continue to leave its mark on Aurelia 7 and beyond. The days on Aurelia 7 had grown brighter, yet they were still filled with challenges. Elior and the awakened humans had begun expanding beyond the city, exploring distant ridges and icy plains. The robotic sentinels moved alongside them, scanning for threats and guiding the group through treacherous terrain. Humanity, once silent and dormant, was now alive again, reclaiming the planet step by step. Every morning brought new discoveries, and every night reminded them of the fragile beauty surrounding them. One morning, Elior stood on a ridge overlooking a valley dotted with frozen lakes. He watched as humans carefully traversed the terrain, mapping paths and identifying resources. The robotic scouts monitored the environment, warning of unstable ice or sudden cracks in the frozen rivers. Elior felt a deep sense of pride. These people had awoken into a world unknown, yet they were learning, adapting, and thriving. Their determination gave him hope that humanity could rebuild not only on Aurelia 7, but across the stars once more. Among the humans, a few had begun experimenting with agriculture, using preserved seeds stored in the city's data cores. They planted hardy crops in sheltered areas where the soil beneath the ice was exposed and nutrient-rich. Small green shoots began to break through the frost, a sign that life could flourish again. Elior observed the progress carefully, making sure the experiments were protected from storms and temperature swings. Each sprout was a symbol of resilience, proof that humanity's legacy could endure even in the harshest conditions. As the weeks passed, the humans gained confidence. They built temporary shelters closer to the valley, establishing outposts that could serve as bases for exploration and expansion. The city behind them was no longer the sole hub of activity. It had become the heart of a growing civilization. Elior marveled at the way people adapted, learning from mistakes and innovating solutions. They discovered new ways to harness the planet's geothermal energy and created systems for storing water from melting ice. The knowledge preserved for millennia was being put to practical use, and the planet itself seemed to respond, becoming slightly more hospitable with each day. Yet despite the progress, challenges remained. A sudden storm swept across the plains one afternoon, forcing Elior and the humans to take shelter in a nearby cave. The wind howled, ice and snow whipping past the entrance like a wall. Visibility dropped to almost zero, and the ground trembled from shifting glaciers. The humans huddled together, unsure of what awaited them outside. Elior calmed them, explaining how to stay safe and reminding them that they had survived worse by relying on knowledge, teamwork, and courage. When the storm finally passed, the group emerged to find subtle changes in the landscape. Ice had cracked in some areas, creating new streams and pathways, and small landslides had revealed hidden caves beneath the ridges. Elior realized that these changes, though dangerous, could also be opportunities. The planet was alive and dynamic, not frozen in time. Humanity would need to learn to read its signals, to work with the environment rather than against it. Every new discovery was a lesson in adaptation, a step toward thriving on this world once more. During one exploration, Elior and a small team discovered a cavern filled with glowing crystals embedded in the ice. The crystals emitted warmth and energy, a natural resource that could be harnessed to support life and technology. The humans were amazed, and even the robotic scouts paused to analyze the formations. Elior explained how these crystals could supplement the city's energy systems, providing sustainable power without overtaxing the old machines. The discovery was a turning point. It showed that Aurelia 7 had resources beyond what was recorded in the ancient archives, and that life here could flourish if humanity learned to work with the planet. Elior also realized that humanity's legacy was not limited to survival. He encouraged the humans to record their experiences, to document the new civilization they were creating. Holographic archives were set up, capturing discoveries, maps, and lessons learned. The process reminded Elior of his own solitary work before the humans awakened, yet now it was a shared effort. Humanity's story was no longer paused. It was being written in real time, with new chapters unfolding each day. The humans began forming roles and responsibilities. Some focused on exploration, mapping distant regions and testing the limits of the frozen plains. Others worked on technology, repairing and improving the city's systems while integrating lessons from the past. a group specialized in agriculture and resource management, experimenting with ways to grow food efficiently in a harsh climate. Elior oversaw these efforts, providing guidance and encouragement, ensuring that each group understood the importance of collaboration. The sense of purpose, once lost for millennia, had returned stronger than ever. One afternoon, while surveying a ridge, Elior noticed movement far in the distance. A group of humans approached, carrying supplies and equipment. They were the latest to be awakened, brought out of stasis carefully and under Elior's supervision. Seeing them reinforced the idea that humanity's revival was only beginning. Every new arrival added strength, skills, and hope to the growing community. Elior welcomed them warmly, guiding them through the city and introducing them to the practices and systems established by those already awake. With each passing day, the humans learned more about the planet and its potential. They discovered small animals adapted to the icy climate, which could be observed and eventually raised for food. Streams and lakes thawed in patches, offering water for drinking and irrigation. The robotic scouts acted as both teachers and protectors, demonstrating how to navigate hazards safely and efficiently. Elior watched as humans embraced the challenges, improvising solutions and taking initiative. The energy of life returned to the world in every action they took. Elior also began exploring the larger mysteries of the city itself. He found records suggesting that Aurelia 7 had been a hub for research and innovation, not just survival. Advanced technology, much of it dormant, was hidden in sealed chambers, waiting for those capable of understanding it. Elior carefully began unlocking these areas, teaching the humans to study, experiment, and integrate the technology without endangering themselves. It was a delicate process, but one that promised to accelerate the rebuilding of civilization. The possibilities seemed endless. One evening, the humans gathered in a large central hall to celebrate their progress. Holographic displays showed maps of the territory explored, agricultural successes, and engineering improvements. The atmosphere was electric, filled with optimism and energy. Elior addressed the group, reminding them of the journey they had undertaken, from centuries of silence to the awakening of life on a frozen planet. The humans listened, inspired by the story of perseverance and hope. They understood that their actions today would shape the future of humanity on Aurelia 7. As the celebration continued, Elior thought about the first footstep he had heard when entering the chamber with the stasis pods. That single step had been a spark, a signal that the story of humanity was far from over. Now the sound of footsteps echoed everywhere as humans and robotic scouts moved together, exploring, working, and learning. Each step symbolized progress, connection, and the unstoppable resilience of life. Elior realized that silence had ended, replaced by the rhythm of a civilization reborn. In the following weeks, the humans expanded further, constructing permanent shelters, developing farming areas, and establishing communication networks. They discovered small natural resources that could be harvested sustainably, and Elior guided them in integrating these with existing technology. Slowly, Aurelia 7 transformed from a frozen wasteland into a habitable world, shaped by the hands of those who had once been lost to time. The humans adapted with ingenuity and patience, proving that their species could survive even the harshest environments. Elior took a moment to reflect on their progress. He remembered the long years of solitude, the quiet nights filled with memories of humanity, and the hope that perhaps one day life would return. That hope had been realized. Humanity was awake, active, and reclaiming its place on Aurelia 7. The city, once silent, now pulsed with energy, knowledge, and collaboration. The robotic sentinels had fulfilled their purpose, and the humans had embraced the world with courage and determination. One morning, Elior and a group of explorers reached a high plateau overlooking a valley far below. The sun's rays reflected off the ice, creating a dazzling display of color and light. In the distance, they saw signs of early vegetation, streams flowing through cracks in the frozen surface, and the distant shapes of mountains that promised new adventures. The humans paused, taking in the beauty and the enormity of what they had achieved. Elior felt a sense of awe, realizing that they were witnessing the beginning of a new era, not just surviving, but thriving. In the heart of the city, work continued. Educational programs were established, passing knowledge from the ancient archives to the newly awakened humans. Lessons in engineering, agriculture, environmental management, and survival ensured that the population would grow stronger and wiser. Elior oversaw these efforts, proud of the resilience and creativity of his species. They were no longer just survivors, they were pioneers, shaping the future of life on Aurelia 7. As weeks turned into months, the humans built a network of settlements connected by energy and communication systems. Trade and cooperation flourished, and the city became a hub of culture, science, and exploration. Elior watched as humans established leadership roles, organized expeditions, and documented discoveries. The sense of community and shared purpose filled him with hope. Humanity, once thought lost, had returned stronger and more capable than ever. One evening, Elior stood on a ridge, looking over the city and the expanding settlements. The robotic scouts patrolled alongside humans, their movements now fluid and coordinated. The auroras in the sky painted colors across the ice, reflecting the vibrancy and life returning to the planet. Elior felt a deep satisfaction, knowing that he had played a part in this resurgence. The silence of 15,000 years had ended, replaced by the footsteps of a civilization reborn. He realized that the first footstep he had heard was not just a signal, it was a promise. A promise that humanity's spirit could not be extinguished, that even after millennia of solitude, life could return, adapt, and thrive. The humans around him were living proof of this resilience. The city and the planet had become a testament to hope, ingenuity, and the enduring power of humanity. Elior felt a sense of completion, yet he knew the journey was far from over. Aurelia 7 was a vast and dynamic world, full of mysteries yet to be uncovered. But for the first time in thousands of years, humanity had the opportunity to shape its destiny, to learn from the past, and to build a future filled with life, exploration, and discovery. Every step they took, every new settlement, every experiment in survival was part of a story that would continue for generations to come. As he watched the humans working, laughing, and exploring, Elior smiled. He had spent 15,000 years in silence, guarding the memory of a lost civilization. Now, the silence was broken, replaced by the sounds of life, progress, and hope. Aurelia 7 was no longer a lonely planet. It was a cradle of rebirth. Humanity had returned, stronger than ever, ready to face the challenges of a new world and to leave its mark on the universe once again. The footsteps continued, echoing across ice and stone, signaling a future full of promise. Elior knew that every footstep mattered, each one carrying the story of resilience, courage, and the enduring spirit of humanity. And as the sun rose over the frozen horizon, casting light across the expanding settlements, he understood that the first footstep he had heard so long ago had been the beginning of something extraordinary, a new dawn for humanity on Aurelia 7.